All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 6th episode of Dear Dr. Fantasy. It is my pleasure to introduce my guest for this episode, none other than Sarah from Sarah Reads. Hello, Sarah.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Philip. I'm very excited to have the chat today.
I am as well. I've been looking forward to this very much, and I am an admirer of your channel. Ever since I saw the first video, I was deeply impressed with what I saw there. I thought, wow. And this was back when you were kind of just early days, getting
At the
started.
beginning, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't remember how many subscribers you had at that point, but I think it was maybe under 100 or something.
I think it was.
Yeah.
You were responsible for the first boost of the channel, and I'm still grateful for that. But it was also a little overwhelming at the time because there were like, I don't know, 10 people watching every video. And then all of a sudden there were a bunch more. And I was like, oh gosh, this is a lot more pressure now.
Yeah, that puts a little more pressure, I suppose. But I mean, it was a no-brainer for me, actually, because I was doing I think at the time I was thinking of doing a shout out video or something like that, because somebody did that for me early on, and I was very touched by it, and I thought that was a great gesture. And I didn't even know you, because I was so ignorant about BookTube when I was starting all this. So I didn't even know that was a thing, like shout out videos. This actually, it was Chris from Chris Bookish Cauldron did that shout out video, and it included me in there. I was like, wow, what a nice guy. And this is such a great thing to do. So I've done a couple shout out videos, but it was a no-brainer for me at the time. I think you had left a few comments on some of my videos, and I thought, okay, it sounds like this person has a channel, because it was Sarah Reads. I think that was your name from the beginning. Yeah. I think, yeah. So I said, all right, let me see, and I clicked on your icon, and sure enough, okay, and I watched a video or two, and I thought, wow, okay, she's really smart and she's really well read. This is the real deal. This is a channel that, even if I hadn't said a word, your channel, I'm sure, would have just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. So it was just a matter of when. So I'm glad that I was able to jump on board fairly early and look like I'm smart by saying, wow, check this out, guys.
I don't think you have to work that hard, but thank you.
Yeah. Well, speaking of trying to look smart, I'm very excited about the Jeopardy, the charity Jeopardy that we're going to be doing it's going to be on Alan's channel, right?
It's going to be on Alan's channel. He's going to stream it. So it'll be a special episode of his ongoing Jeopardy series. And It's going to be a week and a day away. So next Sunday.
Yeah, the 10th, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we know the time yet?
I don't know if we've set a specific time. I think it's going to be early afternoon Eastern time. So like maybe 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. Eastern, just because we have a European contestant and we want to make sure that we're not giving you guys a huge edge by making him stay up late into the night.
Oh, come on. We need to give us any edge possible, because this European you're talking about is not just any European. He was a European Jeopardy champion. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, that's very true. Apparently it works a little bit differently there, where they film an episode and then there will be a hiatus of several months, I think, but it's very interesting. So the episode of Jeopardy, because he did send me a clip of him playing, they have uniforms, like they have robes that they wear during it looks almost like, when you're receiving your doctorate and you wear the robe and you go. So it's I
like that.
Yeah. I couldn't understand what they were saying because it was not in English, but he seemed like he was doing very well.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure, I don't know if you saw or not, but I described this scenario in my Week That Was episode this morning, where I pretty much feel like you're throwing me and Alan into a cage match with a behemoth wrestler who's going to throw us around like we're rag dolls. So, I mean, that's kind of how it feels right now, I think.
But for charity.
But for charity. So it's for a good cause. So I am willing to be crushed and completely humiliated.
No, definitely not. I think the good thing and what makes it tough for Alan sometimes is his show has become so big
Yeah.
that it can be anybody. Like there's tons of people who always want to be on there, but I feel like I know the three of you fairly well. So hopefully that means I can ensure that you will have relatively even footing in the game.
Okay. So you've rigged the questions in our favor. Is that what you're
I
saying?
know, I wouldn't say that.
Oh.
Is that why I'm here?
I was kind of hoping for maybe a little bit of a hint about the categories or something.
We'll see. I will say that because it's on Alan's channel, there will be some classic favorites from Alan's Jeopardies, and then some extra ones. So my task today, actually, after we finish recording this, is to write some questions. Alan and I have very different personalities, so I know oftentimes he'll be writing them right up to like the minute before.
Remember the last time we had our group discussion on An Autumn War? The entire discussion, he was writing questions for the Jeopardy that was going to happen like an hour later.
But we'll see how it goes. I'm excited, and Jimmy's going to be there. We're going to go live a little bit before the game just to pump things up, have a chat, play some bets. You know,
it's like the Super Bowl with the pregame warm-up thing. Yeah,
and who better than Jimmy really to run that?
Yeah, that's so awesome. Jimmy's perfect. So yeah. Wow. Well, I'm really excited for it. And are we telling everybody what the charity is for yet, or is that?
We can, yeah. So we, I think the official charity is going to be Doctors Without Borders.
Fantastic.
And I do know that they have a specific fund opened for the Ukraine. So I guess we'll decide if we're going to donate specifically to that fund right now. Okay. There were a couple of ideas thrown around. So luckily there are some websites where you can go and it's kind of accountability for charities to see how much of your donation goes directly to on-ground services, how the funds are allocated. So this particular charity seemed to have a fairly high rating, and they do really good work. I have not personally worked with Doctors Without Borders, but I do have friends who have worked with them, and they also report back very positive things. So I do know that they do good work. Yeah. And yeah, it'll be fun to get the BookTube community together to help support that.
Fantastic. Yeah, I just on a private note, that's an organization that my wife and I frequently support and have looked into. And absolutely, I have the same impression that they allocate the vast majority of their funds toward actually helping the folks that they say they're helping. And I know that they're doing also, they have ongoing efforts to improve their organization. For example, I think they're looking at diversity within their organization at the moment, which is fantastic that they're doing that. So in other words, it's an organization that I trust. And I think that's a great place to be trying to help. So yeah, fantastic. I'm really excited for that. Very excited. So great. Well, so we talked about the Long Price Quartet a little bit, and I know that you have just started the last book, The Price of Spring.
I have.
Yeah, I'll be starting it tomorrow myself, and so we will be having, I would guess, maybe in a couple of weeks. We'll have to make sure everybody has had a chance to read it. Most of the others have read it already. I know Andrew finished it yesterday.
He finished it very quickly. He read through it very, very fast, I think. And he sent me a message that said, I think I'm going to be in a constant state of anxiety until this book is over. So it must be very intense.
Cool. I think Zara has already finished as well.
Yes.
Of course, Alan has finished The Long Price Prophet. So, and I don't know about Nico yet, but I'll probably be last as usual, but I will finish it up probably within a week, and I'm really excited. This is a series that I'm happy really have to thank Alan, because I don't know if I would have picked it up without his enthusiasm.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
There's always those series where there's some books you're going to read regardless, because you just know that they're for you. You've heard a lot about them. And there are some series, at least for me, that without BookTube, I don't think I ever would have picked them up. And Long Price Quartet is one of those. And I'm very grateful to Alan for going out on a limb all the time and talking about books that nobody else has ever heard of.
I think that's where he's carving his niche now, is he wants to find obscure books that no one else is shouting about. And then he's going to he's gonna enlighten us. I think that's his shtick these days, right?
And he does it so well, and it works
Oh,
so
yeah.
well for him because he can sell anything. Like anything that Alan talks about, you want to read. Hands like there's no
Yeah.
question. It is
Yeah.
uncontested.
Oh, I have a list now of authors that I'm reading because of him, and starting with Daniel Abraham, but then next is going to be Josiah Bancroft, and with the Books of Babel, and then after that, probably I'll have to pick up KJ Parker because he keeps screaming about KJ Parker.
There's just too much. I think I may try to fit in a novella or two by him this year, because it seems like an easy way to at least get something on the never-ending TBR.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, yeah, and I've been deeply impressed by Daniel Abraham's writing, and I'm sure that eventually I'll read some of his other books because he's definitely that good. Really wonderful character writer. That's kind of the consensus, I think, right? And if you're a kind of a plot-driven reader, though, and you want action and fast pace, probably not your thing, I would say.
No, likely not going to hit the mark for you.
Right.
But no, he's an excellent character writer, and just so efficient with the way that he communicates things. I have been so impressed that because, and as someone who has a PhD in English lit, I'm sure you've had to read the range of writers and styles, and there's sparse writing, a la like Ernest Hemingway, let's say. But then what Daniel Abraham does is it's not that his sentences are sparse in that way. It's not that same very restricted writing style, but he can just communicate things in one or two sentences that tell you so much about a character, and it's a gift. There are not a lot of writers that I have read who are able to do that so efficiently and effectively at the same time. I'm very impressed by it, and that's why I've only read the first 3 chapters of The Price of Spring, but just from the prologue alone, I understand so much of what characters have been doing over this 15-year gap, and how they have adjusted to the world and the way that they view things. And it's very difficult to do that. Yeah. At least I think it is. I think it's very difficult to pull that off well.
I totally agree. It is, I'm sure, a very difficult thing to do. And I would think he'd be a great fit for you too, because I always think of you as somebody who's got a lot of great insights into characters, and somebody who enjoys sort of picking apart what makes them tick and that sort of thing. And you can tell that Abraham, that's what he's really interested in. So when there's action in his stories, but it always serves the character development, I feel like, right? And that's what he's focused on. I mean, every writer is kind of focused on something. We all, when we write, we have our favorite thing that we do, so I just read Rage of Dragons, for example, and you can see Evan Winter loves action and does it really well, right? Abraham is really, really interested in what's going on in here. And I find that very interesting. And I think that would be a real win for you as somebody who's a trained psychiatrist. So this would be a fascinating author for you to read, I would think.
He is. I enjoy reading his books so much, and I enjoy thinking about them afterward, just thinking about the characters, their motivations. There are lots of great character writers. What I have really enjoyed about Long Price Quartet is that time. So I have enjoyed seeing how Abraham writes his characters at 18 versus 30 versus 45 versus 60. It's such an interesting transition, and he really is able to differentiate them and their motivations, how their lives have informed the person that they have become, the choices that they make. And he doesn't shy away from making his characters act and react in ways that are very true to life. So in ways that are not flattering to them. Like, even though these are characters that he knows we need to be invested in, he does not tiptoe around those darker parts of their personality. It's very, very, it's so nice to see. I love to see.
It feels very authentic.
Yes.
It feels very authentic. And you can tell he's just fascinated by human psychology and the human condition. So yeah. Is that something that you do when you're reading? I'm curious. Do you kind of find yourself diagnosing characters and stuff like that? Yeah.
Sometimes I do. It's hard not to. So I don't ever actively try to do this, whether I am reading or meeting someone or hearing, friends vent or family members go through difficult times. I never actively think like, what do I think is going on with this person?
Okay.
But when you do that all the time, there's obviously some bleed through.
Yeah.
It's very difficult for me to not learn all about a person and not let my own experience kind of seep into that. So
Yeah.
there are some books where I have probably put more effort into that than others. And there are some books, let's take the Farseer trilogy, for example.
Okay.
Like there are some books where characters are clearly going through a difficult time, where if you look at that in a modern context, you can say they're going through a major depressive episode.
Yeah.
And so when that is happening, I automatically find myself thinking like, well, obviously, like these are the things that this person went through as a child. And this is, why he's reacting in this way. I say he, because we both know I'm talking about.
Yeah, we know who you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah.
And these are the major precipitants that kind of pushed this episode to the forefront. And these are the elements of his personality that either make it likely that he's going to be able to resiliently fight through this, or these are the reasons why he's probably going to struggle. And it doesn't always work out perfectly because these are written characters. They are people who are created. But I think that's how you can tell when an author really understands people. And that doesn't mean that they need to have a firm grasp on up-to-date terms or diagnoses. I think of Stephen King for this, actually, because he sometimes outright writes a diagnosis in a book. And I'm like, dear Mr. King, that is not what that is. But the way that the people are reacting and the symptoms that they have and the way that it plays out does feel very true and very authentic to how people would act. So I don't think that you need to be well-versed in modern psychiatry in order to write people well. You just need to understand people, because as much as we all want to feel very unique, we do all react to things in very similar ways. There is a commonality in all of us. And the more distressed you are, the more we revert back to that kind of those basic needs and those basic wants. So it's interesting. It's interesting to see the really talented authors create characters, because they're so fun to follow and they bring out that emotion.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, it is though you talked about those universal things, and the older I get, the more I look back in my life and I realize it's not exactly like a script that I've been following, but there are certain patterns that I see, right? Like midlife crisis. No, I wouldn't have a midlife crisis like starting a BookTube channel in my late 40s, right? So it's
we just need to wait for the car. We need to wait for the convertible to come.
Well, or the Harley. Yeah,
that's true. That's true.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's fantastic. But it's interesting though that you say though that in your normal day-to-day life, in your interactions with people, or I would guess on BookTube as well, let's hope you're not sitting there thinking, oh, I know what's wrong with Philip,
No, I don't. No, I don't. I do. I spend a lot of time interviewing people. So
yeah,
throughout my week, there will be, on a typical day, I probably see like 20 people. And then, you do that 5 days a week.
Wow.
And yeah,
that's a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot. I talk to a lot of people, and when you talk to that many people, and I've been doing this I started medical school in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been doing that for 12 years, not all psychiatry in the beginning, but I've been talking to people for that long. That's been the majority of my day. So I would like to think that I can pick up on certain cues, certain verbal cues, the way that people hold themselves. So I do find myself sometimes thinking, and it's easier when you're friends with someone, I'm like, this person seems like they're having a rough time. maybe I should send them a message and just see, because when you're used to observing people in that way, that comes through sometimes. And it's easier to do, obviously, when you're live with people or when you know them really well. But I do find it hard sometimes not to be like, oh, maybe I should message them. Just to make sure that everything is good.
Yeah, because I do find it hard to separate my professional persona from my everyday interactions. I have a tendency, for example, you can't, I'm sure you would never imagine this, but I have a tendency to kind of lecture people like I'm in a classroom. And I know professors who just cannot talk to anyone without sounding like they're teaching a class.
Mhm.
And others are good at it. Others are just, that's a mask they put on when they're in the classroom, and when they're outside of it, they're just normal. But I catch myself sometimes, and even my kids will say, Dad, you told that story like 50,000 times. Do we have to hear it again? And I know it's a story I would tell in my classroom. So, so I do find that my professional persona does bleed into my my daily life sometimes, but
and it's hard. It is hard to separate that. And when I make videos, I want to sound like I know what I'm talking about. And there's a certain area that I feel like I'm able to do that a lot better in. So then, it lends to making videos that talk about those kinds of things. But it is good to have some separation, but it's impossible to completely turn that off.
Yeah, I think so. But there is a skill, I guess, in a way too, is separating what you do for a living from what you do for fun. But they can inform each other too. So that's kind of cool. And I think you bring something very special to BookTube as a result of your professional training and your insights. So that I think is just fantastic.
Thank you. That's nice here. It's good. And it's good to be on this side. Most of my time is on the other side, listening, asking the questions. So I don't talk about myself very often. So it's nice to be on this side of the conversation sometimes.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and I totally agree with you about King too. Even though he might get the terminology mixed up, what a great writer for understanding human psychology and warts and all. I mean, that's something you mentioned about Daniel Abraham, that he will portray the not so pretty stuff. And I feel like that King almost is like focused on that sometimes, that side of us that can be, and that's why it's horror, I guess, but it's also it's horror because we're looking at ourselves in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, the reflection is what is horrifying.
Yeah.
What I like about Stephen King, what makes him stand out to me is I really like the way that he writes interpersonal relationships that feel very true to life. So there's no ornamentation when he writes a relationship between two people, whether it's a friendship, and that could be a childhood friendship or an adult friendship. Just the cadence of the speech, the way that he works in inside jokes and terminology that people would create in their everyday life feels very authentic. It can be difficult sometimes, and I find this in fantasy a lot because people need to make up terms. They need to name places, they need to name people, they need to name their curse words in some cases. And sometimes they do that really well. And sometimes it feels very stilted and very artificial. And you can tell that this is not real. But I never feel that way with Stephen King. Whatever complaints I have about his books, and they vary depending on what I'm reading, it always feels authentic.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you mentioned Robin Hobb earlier too, and I personally would put her way up there, maybe at the very top in terms of writers who get human psychology. I would put Joe Abercrombie up there as well, in a way that is a bit dark. But what are some of the writers that you think of? And I'm kind of putting you on the spot here.
No, that's okay.
What are writers that you think of as being really exemplary when it comes to portraying human psychology? Or you think, wow, because Joe Abercrombie actually majored in psychology, I believe.
I would believe that. If I don't know much about him as like his personal life, but I wouldn't find that difficult to believe. So I think he's an excellent character writer. Robin Hobb is excellent. Stephen King is one of my favorites. Yeah. People outside the usual we talk about, I have been very impressed by Daniel Abraham, like we just said. There's a young adult writer. Her name is Maggie Stiefvater, who wrote this magical, it's kind of like a fantasy / magical realism series called The Raven Boys. Her characters are very well drawn, and she has written other books that I have read, and I don't like them as much as I like that series, but I think that she does a really good job of exploring, especially fear and feelings of inadequacy, which ties into those YA themes, because that's something that they at that age, everybody struggles with that sense of self and whether or not who you're going to become and how you're going to get there. But I think when I read her books, I was very impressed with her character work. I really enjoyed, I think this may be one of the first comments that I ever wrote on your channel, was when you were reviewing the Poppy War. I think that Rebecca Kuang did an excellent job with the character of Rin.
Yeah.
It was a very limited scope. So we didn't get to see her flesh out her other characters as much, which is why the Poppy War probably didn't rise the ranks in terms of my favorite series. But I was very impressed, despite the fact that I don't like Rin very much. And I don't think many people like Rin very much. I think she was really well drawn. And I think that she had an excellent handle on a person who had been traumatized as a child and neglected and mistreated, and how that might play out, especially when you add those power dynamics that exist in the Poppy War. So I found that very impressive when I was reading that, and it makes me want to read more of her books. And I think some of the themes I really liked in Poppy War about things like intergenerational trauma and colonialism. The new book that she has coming out called Babel looks like it's going to explore a lot of those things, but in a more intimate setting. So I'm really excited for that, because I'm hopeful that she might become an author whose character work I really enjoy as we continue on.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I completely agree with you about Rin. I think she was most definitely the front and center. I mean, she is the Poppy War trilogy is all about Rin. And if that's a character, and I didn't think I needed to like her necessarily. I'm not going to invite her over for tea, that could be very tense, I think. But I really admired what R.F. Kuang did with that character work. There were other things that I personally thought, okay, this is a really impressive debut trilogy where I thought there was a lot to praise. There was some, I thought, narrative clunkiness.
Yes, I would agree.
3 books, but I just think she did a fantastic job with Rin, and I didn't mind the fact that she was angry all the time, because of what R.F. Kuang was exploring there. I think it's quite understandable when you look at what she was going through. It's a bit similar to the character Tao in Rage of Dragons. I think a lot of people sort of react negatively toward that character, and boy, he's angry all the time. But yeah, look what he's going through, and look what he suffered, and look at how the institutions of that society have this kind of baked in prejudice and how that creates trauma in people. So yeah, you don't necessarily have to like characters to find them compelling, so that's really amazing stuff that she did there. And I will certainly pick up whatever R.F. Kuang does next as well. Do you know when that's coming out?
I think August is the release date, because I think the initial arcs are just going out now, because it's a really funny tweet by Petrick when R.F. Kuang was announcing the arcs. He's like, so excited to see people getting their arcs. And then Petrick retweeted it, was like, and I'm just here like a hobo with nothing.
Patrick. So, I'm sure he'll get one though, right?
I'm sure he will. I'm sure. I think she even said, "Oh gosh, I will get you one, Petrick." So because he's Petrick, obviously he's going to talk to R.F. Kuang, and she's going to know who he is and respond to his tweets, because that makes sense. But
well, he did an interview with her on his channel.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he did a lot of the early promotion of Poppy War, I think, before a lot of other people had read it, because it did go through that period on BookTube where everyone was reading it. But as with most fantasy, Petrick was there first. So.
Yep. Yeah, he has a knack for picking some real great winners.
Definitely.
The guys, I mean, I listened to him because thinking, all right, what am I going to be reading in a few months? And I'll listen to Petrick.
Or even a few years sometimes. Like he was on the John Gwynne bandwagon way before any of us were.
And now look, I've read everything that Gwynne has published, and I'm very excited to be reading the next one in the Bloodsworn trilogy. The Hunger of the Gods is coming out really soon, right?
Even in a couple weeks, right? Or maybe next week, or
I think even under 2 weeks. So less than a fortnight.
Wait, is that a drop everything and read for you? Is that a release date read?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, that's going to be a drop everything and read for me. And I hope that we'll be able to get the war band together at some point. Patrick and I were talking about that. Maybe we could all get together and have a chat about Hunger of the Gods. Yeah. Are you planning to read it yourself?
I am, but I think it's going to be in May. I think I had kind of overcommitted myself to reading a lot of things in April.
I listened to your video where you mentioned that you're in all these buddy reads and stuff. So
yeah, so in May, it's just the things that I want to read, and that is near the top of the list for me. I'm also excited to hear that there is a fairly detailed summary at the beginning where it takes us back to the last book, because it's nice to fill in some of those details sometimes.
Very helpful. Yeah. So I've been restraining myself here for quite a while, but I am dying to talk to you about, I know it's only been one book. I think you've read Gardens of the Moon, right?
I did.
Okay. So you've got a ways to go, obviously, and there's a lot to find out. But I'm very curious to talk to you about Gardens of the Moon. Your review of it was pretty positive, I thought.
Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah. It was a great, actually, video. I'd recommend everybody check it out for our wonderful Gardens of the Moon reaction. And speaking of authors who get human beings, I think Erikson is for me at the very top as well. He's just brilliant in my opinion. And it's funny because he does something, as you know, different from what most fantasy authors do, which is hyper focus on one character or a small group of characters that clearly are the protagonist that we're supposed to be rooting for throughout the journey. Whereas Erikson gives us just an incredible cast of characters, a large array of people. And what he'll do is you'll see a facet of this character, Lauren, for example, or Tattersail, or even an epic character like Anamander Rake. You know, you'll meet this and you'll think, okay, that's what this is. I know you got the category, but then later on, something else happens and you get a different perspective, or maybe you get that character's perspective, and your idea of this person completely shifts. And you think, oh, I thought that, so now I understand why she did that, or now I know why she doesn't like him, or, I think he's incredible at that, at defeating our expectations that probably are set up because of various tropes and conventions and things like that. Like, he's just totally outside of that and having a bit of fun, even messing around with that, I think.
And helping push us in one direction and then bring us back to the other.
Yeah.
I can't comment on a lot because I've only read the first book, but I will say that what stood out to me in that same vein is that when I was learning about even the characters in this book, who I thought there were quite a few compelling characters I liked to follow, I felt more than probably any other book, certainly any other fantasy book that I have ever read, that I was part of a story rather than reading a story. Because that, like you said, the way that he writes characters, it's not that you're getting this full exposition heavy exploration of what they're feeling and why they're feeling it and why they're going to do. We don't get any of their justifications.
Right.
We get to see them as the people around them see them. We get to see them make the decision, but not necessarily understand why they made the decision, which is so true to life. We're surrounded by people and we see how they react to situations, but no one can know entirely, even if you spend all this time with people. Like, you can't really know why people make the choices that they do. And hearing you, and especially you and Joanna, because you were the two that I followed the most closely who have a lot of positive things to say about the series. I can understand why those themes of humanity, of compassion, why those come to the forefront, because I think that the way that the people were presented and the world was presented, it felt very human. It felt like I said, like you were part of this world, and I get the sense that I am going to follow these real people as they kind of stumble through and make their mistakes and connect with one another. I'm very excited. I did not know what to think or how to feel about starting the series. And I did wonder, because we all like that kind of academic, or many of us like that academic exploration, I did wonder, like, am I gonna actually like this? I expect to appreciate it, but am I going to like it as well? Because I like lots of things that, you know, are not what you would call highbrow.
Right.
So I wanted to know if it was going to be, there was going to be a duality there, because there's lots of books that I appreciate. And I talked about this on Chatting with Nuts with Jimmy, like the book A Confederacy of Dunces, for example. I really appreciate that book. I despised almost every moment of reading it because it made me so angry, and I just did not enjoy it. It wasn't one where I was like, oh yes, can't wait to curl up and read this. But thankfully, at least when I was reading Gardens of the Moon, I really appreciated it. And I felt like I had to disconnect and kind of just let myself absorb it and not try to overthink it or, you know, make detailed notes or anything, just let the story happen to me. But I also liked it. I also enjoyed that process, and hopefully that'll continue. But
Yeah.
I'm excited.
I hope so too. Yeah. I mean, I've been very forthcoming about the fact that Stephen Erikson is my favorite author at this point of all time. He displaced Tolkien for me, which is, I didn't think that would ever happen, and might not have ever happened if I hadn't ventured onto BookTube. You know, I had read the Malazan Book of the Fallen before coming to BookTube, and I loved it. I was amazed. I had said lots of great things. I had one video that I did when I started the channel, and I thought what I would do when I started the channel, not knowing what people do on BookTube, I just made a few videos of what I considered to be some of the greatest fantasy series I'd ever read, and Malazan was one of them. But I had read that series and felt like I need to reread this because there's just so much that I know I'm not quite getting. But what I said was, I feel like Stephen Erikson has given me the truest picture of our place in the universe, much more so than what I normally read and consume. And it confused me to suddenly not be identifying strongly with the center of all things, the protagonist, and to be seeing a bit of myself in all these different characters, and feeling the poignancy of their humanity, but also what he does so amazingly well. And these are the moments that just shatter me and bring me to tears, is when he shows us the connections between people, between the various characters who might have been mortal enemies, or, you know, but they see themselves in one another. And these moments are just incredible in the series. You're in for a huge treat, I think. And it's something that I hope you'll savor. I don't think there's any hurry necessarily to just, you know, burn through the series. It's not a series that I feel like I could burn through, that's for sure. But I just feel like it's just such an incredible, and I'm very fortunate to have been talking about it with A.P. Canavan.
Yes.
That's been just tremendously enlightening for me to be able to sit down with him and talk about each of the books. But also, you mentioned Joanna, and I've really enjoyed watching her Malazan journey and hearing what she has to say and learning from her, and Jimmy as well. And it's just,
speaking of burning through the books.
Yeah, I mean, he went through them.
Went through so fast.
Really fast. He went through them really fast. I mean, faster than I think I could. But yeah, it's really, now that I've read every single thing in the Malazan world that's been published so far, except for one last book by Ian Esselmont. And I'm always pushing Esselmont's books too, because I think he belongs in the conversation of best fantasy authors today. I think he's brilliant. But yeah, it's been really great watching other people read. So I'm so looking forward to what you're going to think of all these books. So not trying to put any pressure on you or anything.
No, I'm excited. I am excited to continue, and it's going to be interesting because based on what everybody says, I'm already expecting them to be very different from anything else that I have read, and just the shifting perspectives, the shifting environments. I'm looking forward to it. And even the people who struggle with the series because, you know, of the density or the length or anything. Everybody says that the payoff at the end is unimaginably good. So,
Goodness.
you know, what, you know, there's nothing more demoralizing than picking something up where people are like, it's good, but I wish it had stuck the ending. Whereas with this, it's, you know, it's good, but once you get to the end, it will blow your mind, which makes you want to get to the end.
Yeah. Yeah, it is mind-blowing. It's sublime. It really is sublime. And I think of it as just great literature, just great literature, and a masterpiece, really. But it's interesting how different authors get you emotionally. I think of John Gwynne, for example, as a very different writer, but he also grabs my heart, you know?
Yes.
And it's interesting how different writers do that in different ways, I suppose. But again, maybe it's even with Gwynne, though. I think a lot of it is that found family trope that he does so well. And again, I think that's also about connecting with other people, isn't it? Now that I think of it, so maybe that's what just gets me. And I'm interested in the ways in which people connect with each other. Yeah.
And it's gratifying to see that, and people can do it in different ways. So, you know, writing styles, you probably could not be more different in fantasy between John Gwynne and Stephen Erikson. But I think that they both do a very good job with that, and how the execution plays out is very different. But I would agree, John Gwynne, it's just those interpersonal relationships, like you said. I think when I read, and so this is like, you know, me imposing my own thoughts on an author, but I do think that they're probably fairly accurate. I cannot imagine a world in which John Gwynne is not an excellent father and is not like, does not have the closest knit family, because you can just feel it. You can feel it in those relationships in the books. You can tell that he is not writing about something that he is unfamiliar with. There's a reason that those connections feel so genuine. And I have seen some interviews with him, and he seems like a very genuine person, but I imagine that in terms of family, like that must mean the most to him.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There's such warmth and there's so much heart in those books. And yeah, that's definitely the appeal for me. Yeah. I did have a chance to talk with him once when we were doing The Faithful and the Fallen.
Yes, the final chat, right?
The final chat, the one with Patrick. Yeah. And that wasn't just me, obviously. That was the group. And just, as you say, just exactly what you were describing, just a really warm human being, just a really nice person. And from having the privilege to have interacted with his sons, with Will and Ed, the brothers Gwynne, you can tell that is a beautiful family.
Yes.
That's a beautiful family. Yeah.
And it's interesting. And this is what I like about his new series, is that he's giving us a story where his biggest strengths as an author, like we said, are those interpersonal connections and that warmth. And he's giving us a very bleak story. So it's fun to see the juxtaposition between this new setting that he has and those strengths that he brings across as an author. But I think, at least in the first book, he balanced that well. I felt how the characters cared for each other, even within the restricted confines. Like, for example, Orca as a mom in The Shadow of the Gods is such a different mother figure from the mother figures in The Faithful and the Fallen, because she's trying to raise a child in this brutal world where she knows that things will be taken from them. And her expression of love is to try to make them stronger so that they can live and they can be free. And the way that is executed is much different than his parental figures in his other series. But I never doubted when I was reading Orca's perspective that she loved her child. You knew that, you could feel it. So it's
fiercely maternal.
Yeah. So it's interesting, and I think shows his development as an author, because it takes skill to do that, to be able to differentiate your characters and differentiate your series in that way. So it's, you know, whether tonally this series is going to be for you, I think depends on your personal preference, but it's clear that he is evolving as he continues to write.
I completely agree. Yeah. And he's got, it doesn't hurt either for me that the Icelandic saga inspiration is there. And at moments it really feels saga-like. He's done a brilliant job with that. So the medievalist in me is like constantly cheering while I was reading The Shadow of the Gods, and I expected to do the same when I read The Hunger of the Gods. So yeah, he really nails it. It's eerie almost how well he nails the saga feel in The Shadow of the Gods. So,
and he's a big fan, right? Like those are things that he has loved to read and loves to think about. So it's good that he can honor the things that he loves through his own.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you've got a little bit of a Viking connection in your corner of Canada there, don't you?
Yeah, we do. This is my push is for the Viking BookTube meetup to happen in Newfoundland. We can go and visit the Viking settlement there.
Yeah.
It's fun. You can go, you can get dressed up, you get your picture taken. It's a really cool place.
Yeah, I need to make a pilgrimage one of these days. So if that ever happens, I'll pop in and say hello.
Yeah, so I'm interested because have you started Vinland Saga? You're thinking about maybe reading Vinland Saga. Did you talk about that? The manga?
The manga. Oh yes, Vinland Saga. That would probably be the first manga I pick up.
I think maybe that's what I heard you say. If you were going to read one, then that would be one that you would read. So this is not the overall premise, but in the background, you hear all of these tales about a place, and that place is Newfoundland. Like that is what you were hearing about. So it's interesting. I've only read the first volume and watched the first season, so I don't know if this is somewhere where they end up or not, but it's fun to see it in that historical context.
Cool. Yeah, they do, and of course in the original saga, the original Icelandic Vinland Saga. They end up your neighbors there.
There we go. They come on over.
So I would expect the manga to go there as well.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, another series that you're way ahead of me. I think you're done with this with Dresden now, right? With the
not quite. So I have two left. I have Peace Talks and Battleground, which everyone who has been helping me as I've gone along on this journey, which I would also like to say the Dresden Files fans are so good. Yes. They get so excited that you are reading Dresden, which I love. So that has been really helpful and very motivating. But apparently these you should read as kind of one big book. So I'm planning to read them both this month back to back.
Yeah, that's been my intention, really. I've only read 4 of the books, and those 4 were more episodic.
Yes.
Which I've appreciated because I've been able to sort of fit them in between big epic reads and stuff like that. So they've been very welcome reads for me because they're a bit shorter and fun, a bit lighter.
Yes.
But I really like the character development so far, particularly of Harry. And it's just got kind of a whimsical nature to it that I enjoy. And I can feel myself getting tugged more and more into the series as I go along. And
what
at some point I know it's going to be like, okay, I have to read at least one a month now instead of these big gaps I've been having in between the books. So I'm trying to get Dark Tower done first.
Yes.
And then I can, I think, probably rev up my Dresden reading because I'm thinking that like I said, it's going to come to a point where it'll be hard not to pick up the next one. So, man, the fans, as you said, because I had my reservations with the first few books, particularly with the sort of the male gazy stuff and all that. It made me a little uncomfortable. But the fans were what they had to say about that. I thought, okay, let's give this a try and let's keep reading. And I'm glad I listened to them because it is a series that is really starting to click for me.
And that's the best part about BookTube. So I started Dresden for the first time when I was in university, years and years and years ago. I read the first book and I read it. One of my friends gave it to me. So it was a friend that I knew really well. We had passed fantasy books back and forth. We knew each other since we were young teenagers. So we had shared a lot of fantasy books. We liked a lot of the same things. And he said, I think you'll really like this series. I said, okay, well, I'll pick up the first book. And I read it and I wrote him back and I was like, how could you ever think that I would like this? What about this did you think I was going to like? Because I also found it very difficult in terms of the, Harry and the male gaze, like you said, and I just put it aside and we were not living in the same place anymore. So this was kind of like an instant message. And then he was like, oh, I thought you'd like it because you like this and this, but then no big deal, read this instead. And then we went on to the next series. And I would have never picked them up again if I didn't come to BookTube and see people talking about how the series develops. And that's what is so nice about BookTube, is because you can get that perspective. You get longtime fans who can come in and say, you know, if these were the things that you didn't like, then I'm sure that, you know, it'll get better by this book. And this is when you'll start to see the development. And I also admittedly was more hot-headed when I was younger, like things like that. I would have had a much shorter, right? I would have had a much shorter fuse at that time and thought, you know, this is just not worth my time. And now I would like to think that I have a broader perspective, a more understanding of certain behaviors and tropes.
Yeah.
So, but I have oh, I think my dog just knocked something over.
Oh.
I liked the first few and I spaced them out. I read like one every couple of months. I think it took me 7 months to read the first 7 books. And then the next 7 books took me like 3 months because I was just like going back to back. And funnily enough, I bought the series for my father for his birthday.
Oh, wow.
January, and he's caught up to me now. So he's almost finished.
That's an endorsement if you would buy it for your father, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That's a serious endorsement right there.
Mm-hmm.
So
wow. I think you will get hooked. It's the world expands, the lore expands, the overarching plot starts to coalesce, and you don't feel like things are quite as episodic. There still are case-based books, but there are things in the background that are contributing to the overall story. Yeah. And at least for me, I don't know if you can think of any, but because a year or so passes between each of the books, there's no other fantasy book where I have watched a character grow up over that span of years as I have with Harry. Yeah. And that's fascinating. I love it.
Yeah, we talked about that with Long Price Quartet. We had these gaps. We don't actually see, we get a sense of the growth during those intervening years, but there's like these 15-year gaps. But in the case of Harry, we're seeing every year, I guess.
Yeah.
Really cool. And just like, you know, we mentioned how Rin was the heart of the Poppy War. I guess Harry really is the heart of the Dresden Files. That's pretty obvious. But that's important too, I think, because I think what won me over was I began to feel more sympathetic toward this character. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, sometimes it's a first person narration, and sometimes he has kind of creepy thoughts.
He does.
So, I mean, yeah, he's a male in his 20s, and you know, he has creepy thoughts. Sometimes there's an honesty to that. It's very raw, I think. That I think is, again, it's a very different sort of character work, but there is something authentic about that rawness that we get from Harry. And the fact that it's first-person narration, I think what Butcher does really well is he gives us the sense of a person who's really down on himself. Yes. And the people around him have a different impression of him than that. And that tells the reader, because, hey, folks, don't always trust a first-person narrator, right? Especially when he's thinking about himself, and when Harry is just so, it kind of breaks my heart sometimes how down on himself he is.
And there will be moments of clarity throughout the series where we're offered a more in-depth, I mean, it remains a first-person narrative, but we are offered through either the establishing or breaking down of different relationships, big major changes in Harry's life, just how skewed his perspective is. The journey of Dresden is in part a journey of figuring out who Harry really is, because we get, like you said, this very limited look at himself. He downplays so much of himself, and he has such a warped view of who and what he is, that it's really fun to watch him grow. And I think as the books go on, so once you get probably past book 6, you start to get more from the side characters. So the secondary perspectives, they start to improve. In book 8, the female characters in particular start to take on a bigger role, and you get more from them, and you get to see Harry in like a slightly different light from there. And it all adds to the building up of this character. And whereas when I read the first Dresden book at age like 17 and was like, Harry Dresden, how could I possibly follow you for, 20 books? No, thank you. Now, when I read it, I think, oh, Harry, like I'd follow you forever. If there were 100 books about you, I would continue to read them. So it's been a big shift, and I really like it. I know Alan and Jimmy were talking about this. They had this experience where sometimes it can be difficult because people are hyping it so much that just wait till you get to this book. Just wait, you're going to love it. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be the best. And almost in a contrarian fashion, you want to be like, well, you know what? No, I won't. But it's really true. There is incredible payoff in the Dresden Files, I think, in terms of writing improvement, execution, plotting. This is a long game that Jim Butcher has been playing, and there are details that came up in book 1 that will be of importance in later in the series. So it definitely is one of those series that you need to have read it through in order to fully appreciate it. But luckily the books, like you said, are easy to get through. It doesn't take a lot of time, and it's not as big an investment as it sounds when you say, read this 20 book fantasy series. Right.
Yeah, they're quick reads. They're very quick reads. But so you get the sense that Butcher was planning this stuff from the beginning.
I think so. That is the sense that I get. I think that he is a more intricate plotter than I gave him credit for. And there are scenes that happen in later books that made me realize that I also didn't give him due credit for some of his writing choices. And it's difficult to expand on that, but there are certain perspectives that come into play later in the series where it made me appreciate his technique, not in terms of it being overly poetic prose or, very complex structure or anything like that, but just communicating the story and how certain characters communicate throughout the story as we get to know them better and we see how their lives change. Jim Butcher adapts his writing style to that very well. And I've been impressed. I thought that Dresden would remain something that was just fun for me to throw in between other fantasy series. And I would say that it is a favorite series for me now.
Wow. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. Amazing. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, I have to finish Dark Tower before I feel like I can really just full throttle go with Dresden Files. And of course, I've got other things I'm doing. The very tail end of my Malazan read with AP, and so that's got to come to a conclusion. And then we're going to start up with Jenny Wurtz.
I saw that. That's going to be exciting. I've heard nothing but great things about her writing.
Yeah. But I'd like to finish King before summer. I'd like to finish Dark Tower before the summer.
Very excited. You're at the waypoint, I think, for the Dark Tower series.
They divide.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm excited to see what you think, because, well, you know that I love it so much. And I think that so many of the things that he does in Dark Tower are innovative. I think that they're so unique and they're so compelling. They work so well. But book 5 on is a totally different experience. So
I get the sense that I'm going to know if I'm going to like the last 3 books by reading Wolves of the Kala. But we'll see. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I just feel like that's kind of where I feel like some of the genuine fans of King and of the first 4 books are like, I did not like where this went.
Yeah, the direction.
Right? Whereas others are just as enthusiastic, and they usually say stuff like, it's going to change for you. It's going to be really different from the first 4 or 4.5, because I did read Wind Through the Keyhole.
Yes, you put that in the middle, which is good. I've only ever read it at the end, so
yeah, I'm glad I did. I mean, I'm not reading Salem's Lot, in spite of some very informed King readers saying you need to read Salem's Lot, it'll be spoiled for you by reading Wolves of the Kala. And I'm like, you know what? Number one, I'm very tolerant of spoilers. I don't care, because while I read, I'm not just reading for the plot. I tend to be somebody who will reread a sentence like 5 times and think, wow, that's a beautiful sentence. You know? Or I'm looking at, wow, this characterization is brilliant. And this is a really particularly lovely, descriptive passage or whatever. That's how I am. I'm always looking at that stuff. So I enjoy reading, not just to find out what happens. You know, I'm looking at the technique and stuff. but also I feel like King spoils everything anyway.
Oh yeah, he that's part of the way
Yeah.
that he writes. I think that he is telling you, you shouldn't just be here for the plot. If you are, then
Yeah.
maybe you won't get everything that you want out of this, because he's happy enough to spoil his own plots for you.
He's just like, and then, well, she's gonna die, and it's gonna be awful. But let's get a good 500 pages before you get there. But
let's explore that.
Yeah, let's explore what happens in between. So, but that's a sign of a great author. I think if you can, that's pretty good. If you can spoil your own book like that and still have me on the edge of my seat, wondering how this happens.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And speaking of authors that we would not have read if it hadn't been for BookTube, I would not have read Dark Tower, I'm sure, if I hadn't started on BookTube. There were early viewers who were urging me. Mike, was definitely a major reason why I read Dark Tower, why I picked it up. He's a huge King proponent, as you know.
Yes.
So yeah, and I'm glad that I listened, because this is proving to be a top series for me. We'll see. Maybe I'll hate it after after
That's okay.
the last 3 books. I don't know. Some people seem like, even Mike is not, or I don't know how he feels now, but he talked about how upset he was
at the end. Yeah.
At the end, yeah. So I'm just kind of dying of curiosity too about all that. So
it's gonna be interesting. I think, at the very least, if you don't like this series, at least you got to read The Gunslinger. I know that not everyone loves that book, but for me, even as a standalone, like if he had never written another Dark Tower book and I had only had The Gunslinger, it would still be one of my favorite books. It is one of the most atmospheric books that I have ever read.
Yeah.
And I know it doesn't work for everybody, because there's like in terms of plot follow through, if that's what you're in it for, you might not, I don't think it's going to hit a lot of highs for you. But regardless, if you despise the next 3 books, at least you've read The Gunslinger.
Yeah. No, I loved The Gunslinger. Mm-hmm. It was so weird. And so
it is so weird.
Plus, I love the allusion to the Browning poem
in
there, and you can pique my interest by throwing in a few literary allusions, and King is good at that too. He puts them, pay attention to the epigraphs when you're reading Dark Tower, because they're important,
and he's very well read, like regardless of how many detractors he has, he's very well read. He has read it all. He has read across genres. He has read the poetry, he has read the epics, he has read the popular novels, and they all find their way in there.
And I love his boldness in just throwing it all together. You could have in the same book, literally, a major Shakespeare nod alongside a Wizard of Oz nod. Yes, right? Exactly. I mean, that's Wizard and Glass. That's a huge Shakespeare nod in there. Romeo and Juliet. And then you also have the Wizard of Oz everywhere. So it's like, and of course, Tolkien runs through the series as well. I love the little Tolkien Easter eggs that he puts in there too.
It'll be fun for you to see. So there's some really obvious literary allusions in book 5. And it'll be funny. I can't wait to see your book 5 review. I'm going to be waiting for your Wolves of the Collar review.
Yeah, cool. Well, I think I'm fairly confident I'm going to love the last 3 books.
I hope so.
So we'll see. I don't see how, I mean, at this point, I feel like King has earned my trust. So, but we'll see. We'll see. But I hope that we'll be able to get the quartet together again.
Yes, that would be good.
It
was a great conversation. I really liked talking about those first 3.
Yeah, me too. That was a really helpful conversation for me too, because we had the veterans, you and Mike there, and then we had Chaz. I think he's further along than I am now.
I think he has read Wolves of the Call. I think he's at Song of Susanna.
Yeah, I believe that's correct. Yeah. So yeah, it'll be cool to get us all together again. I'm not sure when I want to do that. Do I want to do that? Do you think we should do it before Chaz and I finish, or maybe at the end, just to sort of, I don't know, we'll see. But or maybe both. I don't know.
Yeah, the more the merrier. I don't think after Song of Susanna is a good time to stop, because Song of Susanna feels like it just transitions into book 7.
Okay.
They came out in the same year, like within a few months of each other.
Wow.
So it would be pre Song of Susanna, and then maybe post the series would be
Okay.
a good place to discuss.
All right, cool. Yeah. So after Wolves of the Kala then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll probably get to that pretty soon, actually.
Yeah.
So I am going to be in a chat with Mike again relatively soon on Michael Crichton's The Eaters of the Dead. So
Interesting.
Are you a Crichton reader at all?
I have read a few of his books. So I've read Jurassic Park, and I read one of the books that was published by his wife following his passing, which was called Dragon's Teeth, which I don't think was incredibly well received by Crichton fans, but I really liked it. So it's about the dinosaur rush and about this intellectual battle between two of the top paleontologists in the field. So there's this long-standing feud, which I originally learned about because my daughter was obsessed with dinosaurs. And so she had all of these encyclopedias about dinosaurs, and they'd give you all the dinosaur facts. And I did not realize that there was this feud between, I think they both worked for separate universities. So it was this race to find the fossils first. And it was dangerous. Like, you could die seeking out these dinosaur fossils because the other university would want to have them first, and they would want to have first rights to have these fossils. And so there was,
wow. It was. Are you saying like academics getting out their weapons and stuff, or
the people that were hired by the academics to get? But I think some academics were also involved in. They would go out to the digs, obviously, when they were found, and then they would have to hire gunmen to transport these fossils. And it was like not an arms race, but a fossil race, essentially.
Wow.
And it's very interesting. So it blends that, because I like the Western setting, which is one of the things that appealed to me about the Dark Tower initially. And I like dinosaurs. So I really liked that book, but I don't know if it's indicative of his work overall, because it is one of those kind of posthumous novels that comes out and you're always wondering, like, was this finished? Is this just trying to capitalize on someone who's no longer with us? And it's hard to know, but I just find that topic fascinating. It made me like, I would love a fantasy book now where there's a fossil race to find like dragon fossils or something. I need this story. Yeah. Wow. But it's just such a cool premise and a part of history that I had no idea about.
Huh. Yeah, that's cool. I had no idea there was a realm of academia that could be so dangerous. I mean, right? my greatest occupational hazard used to be paper cuts.
Right. A strongly worded email.
Yeah. How dare you? Yeah. But that sounds awesome. And my older daughter had a major dinosaur phase too, where she was going to be a paleontologist or whatever a dinosaur scientist is.
Yeah.
So we went to the American Museum of Natural History multiple times, and she had all these dinosaur books and had these little, which she's very tiny even, she had these little plastic dinosaurs. So cute. And I used to play with her with the little plastic dinosaurs. And she used to actually have them in the tub with her. And unfortunately, her favorite one day went down the drain in the tub. She was so distraught. And so I had to make up a story about her favorite little dinosaur making a journey to Paris. And through the pipes and into the ocean and having a great time, having baguettes in Paris or something. But yeah,
that's really sweet. But there's nothing more distressing than a comfort toy being misplaced. It's parental stress as well, because you're thinking, how long do I have? Well, this happened in real time, so there was no way for you to shield her from this. But sometimes you know that bedtime is coming in a couple of hours. You're like, where do I locate this item? Where could it possibly be? Our house is not that big.
But somehow they find their ways into this most obscure corners. Yeah, they do.
That's cute. I miss the dinosaur phase. It's very interesting because your kids are grown up, so you have been through all of this, but when you have them at home, so we were really lucky. My husband has been a stay-at-home dad for our kids' whole lives, so they spent a lot of time at home. And so while they had their own interests, obviously when we were the ones buying them books, we would buy them things, books about things that we thought were cool, and then their interest would attach to that. So we bought Juliet a lot of dinosaur books, and she loved dinosaurs, and so we continued then to follow what she liked. And once they go out into the world, you no longer have any control. And I don't mean it as in like we tried to curate her interests, but they do rub off from you. But once they go out into school, and there's just you lose the battle. And she's a much more of a unicorn girl than a dinosaur girl now, which I also like unicorns, but I miss the dinosaurs a little.
Oh, yeah, it's so true though. Yeah, my younger one had a major Greek mythology phase. It was just everything's about, and of course the Percy Jackson books were
definitely
very important to her. So she had, I think there are 2 different series, one that's Greek and one that's Roman or something.
Yeah.
And so she has all those, and she's probably not looked at them for a couple of years now, but they were a big part, and it was all. Whenever we had like family trivia, we knew we were going to get some Greek mythology questions.
Yes.
So yeah.
I love to hear that you do this as well. So I also find it very hard sometimes to balance. I'm a very competitive person, and I don't want that to necessarily rub off on the kids. I feel like I was very intense as an adolescent, and I would like to make their journey through academics a little smoother and more about the appreciation of learning rather than that kind of race to the top. So we try not to put any pressure on, but our kids are obsessed with trivia. They love it. And so when we eat supper, this is what they want to do, is they want to make it up, and we have to pick categories, and then we have to quiz them. And so this is also what Juliet loves is, and then she picks a topic. So like you said, like it would be Greek mythology. She will pick the topic, and then we need to come up with the questions and quiz them over supper. Yeah. So it's good to know that translates across families.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, and especially on road trips, road trips are a major time for those kinds of games. So.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, lots of fun. I mean, I think being a dad has been the most important and meaningful thing I've ever done by far. I'm pretty sure when I look back on it all, whenever that is, that's probably been the most fun and meaningful thing. Kids are great. They're just, they're a ton of work, but they're also so much joy. So
it's a host of emotions, and like you said, never will you feel that something is so rewarding, and also will challenge your idea of who you are as a person because it's tough, and not tough in a feeling like work, but just opening yourself up to the emotion that comes along with it, the life transitions, the difficulties that they're going to go through that you need to try to prepare yourself for, because there's a balance between feeling like you want to shield them from the difficult things in life and recognizing that they need to learn how to navigate those really difficult situations, and that if you navigate them for them, they will never learn those skills. But it's such a tug between that protective love and that need to step back. It is a challenge, and not a challenge, I think, in the way that people sometimes think you mean when you say that parenting is a challenge.
Yeah. I think one of the hardest things is you can't help but have a vision for your kid, right? Mm-hmm. You just do. And you don't want to push it too hard on the kid. And there is a certain age where you have to actually step back and allow the child to create her own vision. And that's just, you have to accept that, I think, as a parent, and that can be really hard. I mean, I always thought, oh yeah, I'll do that, no problem. But it's actually, okay, now I need to just, let her figure this out herself. And that's a tough phase, because, and of course your gut reaction is, no, you need to do this and you need to work hard on that. And so it's a big challenge. I wonder are there good fantasy books with great parental relationships? described. When I think of parent-child relationships, I don't think of a ton of really fantastic fantasy books. That seems like an underexploited facet of humanity that we could have more of in fantasy, don't you think?
Yes, definitely. The orphan the orphan rising up trope is too prevalent. We need to bring
Parents are all dead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Parents are all dead. So we need some series that incorporates that. And I do wonder, I'm behind in terms of middle grade right now, because it's not something that I read often, but both my kids are now reaching the point where they're ready to transition from kind of early reader novels into actual middle grade. So it'll be nice to see if that's something that gets explored more often. I think one of the biggest pros of modern publishing is that it has become so much more inclusive, especially in that younger age range. There's such a wide variety of stories now. There's such a diversity of stories that I did not have access to when I was younger. So I'm hopeful that maybe that will include some strong parental relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like that's something maybe Robin Hobb and the Live Ship Traders does some with the Vestrits. But it's not like the central focus by any means.
No. And even when you have characters who are parents, I feel like it focuses more on the condition of being a parent than the relationship itself. So I read Dragon's Bane by Barbara Hambly last year, and the character in that book is a mother. So she's a witch and she's a mother, and she's trying to reconcile those two parts of herself, but we don't actually get any interaction with her children on the page. Like there's none of that parental relationship playing out. The fact that she is a mother plays a huge role in the story, but her actually being a mother is not part of the story at all.
Interesting. Yeah, there are some Malazan books that really explore motherhood in some very fascinating ways. So you'll get to those. There are particular books where Erickson will focus a little bit more on brothers, for example, or mothers, or that sort of thing. But these relationships are something that he does explore in the series, and it's really well done. So there's that. But I do think it's something that could be done, I guess, because of the hyper focus on kind of hero's journey sort of thing, where you have the central character who needs to go out into the big bad world and grow up and learn their powers and that sort of thing. That seems to be much more at the center of most fantasy, perhaps.
Yes.
So the parents are usually there to die or to be maybe mean, or
they're a catalyst for that journey rather than a help along the way. I have heard, so I have not read, and this is one of the authors that I want to try the most. I haven't read anything by N.K. Jemisin, but I have heard, so the Broken Earth Trilogy has a big focus on motherhood, right?
Absolutely. Motherhood is so big in the Broken Earth Trilogy, and it's beautifully done. Yeah.
I have those books and I really would like to read them.
I predict right now, this is a bold prediction here, folks. I predict that Sarah's going to love the Broken Earth Trilogy.
Yeah, I expect to.
Yeah.
And I think she's when we were talking about psychologically minded authors, she was a psychologist before becoming an author.
I did not know that, but it doesn't surprise me in the least, because that is one facet of that trilogy that is just so beautifully done. And to the point where I was moved to tears at certain moments. But yeah, that's good stuff right there. And what I always say about that trilogy is I've never seen such a powerful exploration of both oppression and human resilience. So it's really good stuff. Really good stuff.
Is that one that you would use to teach? Do you ever teach?
Yeah, I have actually. I've taught the first book, the 5th season, and funny you mentioned it earlier, but I used it in one year when I was doing a sort of a theme approach to the class. I used it 5th season along with the Poppy War, the first book in the Poppy War trilogy, and Gardens of the Moon. And I can't remember, there were a couple others I think in there, but it was an exploration of imperialism. And that works really well, by the way. doing a sort of thematic approach
To the
where
stories.
you can explore something, a particular theme like imperialism in depth through the lens of these different books and what they have to say about that particular theme. So yeah, I have used it before, and it is definitely another one that I would call great literature. Yeah.
Definitely. And it's nice that, and I know you guys just attended the conference a couple weeks ago, but it's
yeah,
it's nice to see an appreciation of fantasy infiltrating academic spheres.
Yeah, that conference is 43 years old.
Wow.
And so, I mean, there've been people doing it. There've been weirdos like us for quite a while saying, hey, this is good literature. Of course, I do feel like there's some broader acknowledgement that fantasy can be great literature, just like any other form of literature. So I don't know the numbers or how small the conference was in the beginning and how big it's gotten, but I feel like there are more and more people willing to engage in fantasy as a serious academic subject. So yeah, that was all going on at the conference. I didn't attend a ton of panels, which was, it was interesting for me to be, because I used to attend academic conferences, primarily medieval ones. So been to a few of those, one over in York in England. And then there was one I used to go to in Michigan, the Kalamazoo. University of Michigan in Kalamazoo is the big famous medievalist conference. If you're a medievalist, you know Kalamazoo. But I hadn't gone for years to a conference, and this felt different because number one, it was all about fantasy, but number two, it was a mix of academics and authors. So, and that's not something, of course, for a medievalist conference, you wouldn't be bumping up with Chaucer or something, right? Yeah.
That would be, I would have some questions.
That would get pretty creepy. Yeah. So the zombie conference. But no, it was really cool to be able to have that mix, and I enjoyed that. And I did spend a lot of time talking to Jimmy and AP.
I mean,
yeah.
Who can blame you?
Yeah, and of course, Stephen Erickson was so gracious with his time there too, and spending time with us, and got to have dinner with Stephen Donaldson and hang out for about an hour with Jenny Wurtz. Just a lot of fun, and meeting a lot of really kind people, academics and writers and so forth, who love this genre, you know. So, and it is actually, it's the International Conference for the Fantastic in the Arts, and it is inclusive of horror and science fiction and other things too. It's not just fantasy.
Not just fantasy.
So that was a lot of fun, and of course, Alan and Joanna showed up as well.
Dropped in. So exciting.
They dropped in on the Saturday morning when I was leaving. But we got to hang out for a few hours, and it was just so much fun. And I did make the little quick video there where I was going to ask this very serious question, you know, so what's it like to meet these people in real life? And then suddenly I was being roasted.
which you should have predicted.
Which given the people present, I really should have known better. Yeah.
But it's so exciting. It is a testament to the kinds of relationships that you can form through these avenues. And I think what has always really appealed to me about fantasy, more than the sense of escapism, is that there's something about the magic that runs through fantasy that appeals to, I think, a certain kind of person. And at least in my experience on BookTube, in real life, at conferences or conventions, people seem to share that common thread. And I have had very few negative experiences, which has been really nice. Yeah.
The way I put it was, I feel like I found my tribe, you know, and that's really cool. I think it is true with the friendships that I've had in my life. They're usually based around something. So I have my tennis buddies, you know, people I play tennis with every week, and there's a whole aspect to that is social. I even know it tends to be some of the older players they'll spend on the court, they'll be there for maybe 20% of the time they're playing tennis, and then the other 80% they're just talking with each other. You know, I haven't gotten quite there yet. I'll probably be there someday where I'm limping around the court and spending more time talking than playing. But there's definitely an important facet of that is very nourishing. And every friendship I've had has been like that. There's been something that it's been formed around, and stumbling into BookTube the way I did was one of the best things that's ever happened to me, because I found all these really cool, kind and wonderful people to hang out with and talk about stuff. And it was a really special treat to meet some of them and in the flesh, in real life. Yeah.
That's it. I was so happy. Like I've rarely been so happy to see, because I think it was Joanna who posted a picture on Instagram, and I saw it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is simultaneously the best, and also I'm so jealous.
I felt a little bad about that too. It was like, do we tell everybody? Because we're gonna look like jerks for not inviting the whole world.
No, I think it's good to tell everybody.
But I'm glad that I shared a couple videos of it too. And it was funny because when I did the first one, I talked about it. I talked it up for a couple of weeks, saying I'm gonna have this big surprise. You know, on the week that was, I kept saying there's going to be this secret project thing, a little Brandon Sanderson-esque, I guess. But so anyway, I said there's going to be these surprise videos in March and blah, blah, blah. And when the first one came out, which was the talk with Stephen Erickson and with AP and with Jimmy, I did a little selfie that I didn't know at the time was going to be the thumbnail. I said, hey guys, actually it was funny. My wife texted me right after we had finished that chat, I think it was. She texted me and said, why aren't you sending me any pictures? And I was like, I was so busy talking the whole time that it was actually tough to find a moment to make a video. So we're just talking about fantasy and stuff like that. But she texted me and said, why aren't you sending me any pictures? And I said, oh, okay, yeah, guys, I got to do a selfie. My wife wants a picture. So we did the selfie, and that turned out to be the thumbnail for that video. But quite a few people wrote comments saying, I thought this was doctored. I thought this was like fake. You pulled a kind of a, Photoshop thing.
Your editing skills have leveled up exponentially.
Exactly. People were like, wow, what happened? Suddenly you acquired these amazing editing skills. But yeah, it was surreal for the first few minutes.
Definitely.
You should have seen Alan's reaction when he met Jimmy and me in the hotel lobby, because he came actually before the Saturday when we all got together, when Joanna joined us. Alan just came on his own to visit, and he was just it was so cute to watch Alan, like kind of just like, oh, I'm so nervous, because, and I know what he was saying, because it was a little surreal at first to meet people that you've been talking to for years, for a couple of years on the internet, and to see them in person and to see like how tall they are, and it's really strange at first. But then I'd say for me anyway, after the first few minutes, it just felt very natural. It was completely natural and fun.
Awesome. That's it. It's great. I'm really glad that you guys could do that, because it is, once you get past, like you said, that instant of awkwardness, it's so, I imagine, so fulfilling to meet someone that has meant a lot in your life and get to see them face to face. So it's good.
It's pretty ironic too, in terms of me, because I was definitely, before I started the whole YouTube thing, I'm a little embarrassed to admit it, but I was very dismissive of social media. I was like, oh, that's just sad, and how people are just, because it's a poor substitute. It's a poor substitute for an actual like physical relationship where and what I'm realizing, what it didn't take me too long to realize, is that wait, it's not a poor substitute at all. Actually, there's meaningful interactions that take place here.
Mhm.
This is like sustaining stuff where you're meeting people over these common interests. And it's really quite, and especially it's interesting during the pandemic. I think
I was going to say the pandemic has definitely heightened that experience because we have been in this forced situation where you have limited physical contact with people and you have to expand on your online presence, or that's how we've been communicating with lots of people. So I think it helped bring some of those relationships further along.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it was I'm a bit of a hermit, like probably a lot of people who are readers.
Yes.
I would imagine that most of us, in spite of the fact that we love hanging out with each other in these small groups, I think that a lot of us are probably introverts who don't necessarily get a ton of excitement by being in big crowded, parties and stuff like that.
No, definitely not.
So this is a kind of fun thing for us to hang out and bond over. But I'm an introvert for the most part, and I didn't have as hard a time as a lot of people probably during the pandemic because of the fact that I was comfortable staying home all the time and reading. And I will say that I missed the classroom. I didn't miss that live interaction with my students. And I've been teaching online for actually like at least 20 years. And I hope getting better at it. So I knew how to teach online when we all had to just sort of suddenly go online. It wasn't a big problem for me because I'd been teaching online. But I still think there's some kind of spark that you don't get in an online class that is there in a face-to-face class, I think.
I would agree. I don't do a lot of teaching, but I do some. Our curriculum is split. Obviously, our medical students study a variety of subjects. So I usually do, I would say 3 or 4 lectures a year. That's all. But when I do them online, it's so hard to get that same engagement. And as I imagine in what you teach, discussion is such a big part of that it's hard to get that same, like you said, spark. I do think that comes across much more effectively in person. And especially we do, outside of lectures, we do teaching how to interview someone. So it seems like a very basic premise, but as you interview more people, you realize that you need a way to segue. You need to find a way to make the conversation smooth. You need to find a way to question someone without feeling like you're interrogating somebody, a way to make them feel comfortable in your presence. And those are skills that you need to grow. And it has been a challenge over the pandemic to train people in that, because it's this awkward Zoom meetup where you're kind of, my picture will be over here on the screen, and while the patient and the medical student are looking at each other, and they can look at the screen and see all of my facial expressions. And I'm sure, like, when I can hide in the back of a room in person, they can pretend I'm not there, but they can't do that over Zoom. So it's an interesting shift, but it has been making our way back to the classroom a little bit. So hopefully that'll continue in that direction now.
Yeah. I mean, discussion is a lot harder. I mean, what we're doing is great. I have 2 people on Zoom, no problem. 3, 4, even up to 6, I think, not a problem. But beyond that, it gets super awkward to try to have a discussion on Zoom, a meaningful one anyway, because it's just so you're missing a lot of the cues, and it's just hard. And of course, a lot of the students don't have their cameras on, and there is, you're wondering, are you actually there? And of course, I've had at the end of the class, somebody's, icon is still there, and I know they haven't been listening because, like, hello, we're done. You
Time to sign off now.
Yeah, don't forget to leave. That happened to my daughter. You did that, Reshma?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
You're learning new things.
Confession. But what I do is really, as a humanities person, as a literature person, discussion it's everything. That's where the learning happens. That's where the magic happens, really, because it's not, some people's view, I think, of education is more like there's this stuff that you have to ingest and be able to spit out. And if you can do that, then you're done. You've learned what you need to learn. And if that's your view of education, there's actually no need for you to even come to the class.
No.
If you can read in a book and do that, and then come back and spit it out, and everyone's certified that you know this. Bye.
Congratulations.
Yeah, that's not what we do. And in fact, what we do on BookTube is the same thing. We talk, and that's where the magic happens. That's where the learning happens.
Yes.
Is in that dynamic discussion. And I learn stuff every semester. I've read these things in most cases more times than I can count, but I'm still learning stuff from this unique conversation with this group, this particular group of students. And so that for me is where the real learning happens, is when you're talking about it together. Because you're not learning information, you're learning critical thinking. You're learning how to assess, how to analyze. You're learning about human nature. You're learning empathy. And you can only do that with other people, right?
Yeah. And it changes your perspective. I remember, obviously, your professor makes a big difference. And I imagine that your students get a great experience when they're in class with you. But I had a professor, so we had a course at Memorial University called English Literature after 1800, maybe. There was some division of time. It was not the medieval period. It was some other specific allocation of time. And one of the books that we had to read for that class was The French Lieutenant's Woman.
Oh, okay.
And so I read that book. I was like, I don't think I like this very much. I did not enjoy the experience of reading this. And then we went to class, and the professor for this class was excellent. He was also one of the orators for the university. He would always give the commencement speeches. He was just a very engaging presence, an excellent professor. And going to class and having him, he was very discussion based. He had an excellent teaching method. And going to class and discussing the book after, 6 classes or something, I was like, I love this book. It totally shifts the way that you feel about things, because I got to hear what other people in the class felt. I got to explore some of the themes, or maybe some of the perspectives that I didn't have any insight into, maybe other pertinent details about the historical period or about how literature was evolving at that time. And it really adds to the way that you appreciate a book. You cannot have the same level of appreciation for something after reading it, I think, alone, that you can when you discuss it with other people. Even if you love it on your own, you can only love it more by discussing it with other people.
I totally agree. I mean, that's basically what I'm here for. That's what BookTube is, what you just described. So it's just wonderful international online classroom that we're all a part of, and it's a community too, of course. So it's fantastic for that. But yeah, you just perfectly described what I hope I'm doing in a classroom, and it's a wonderful feeling when you have a student say to you, and I've heard this fortunately over the years in a variety of ways, is something like, I used to hate literature and now I get it, and it's actually fun, and I'm actually going to take another class in this, and I'm like, yes,
yes, it's a really good feeling.
It's a great feeling, and that's what keeps me going, frankly. That's what motivates me to keep going. No doubt about it. That's the students are why I'm there, and the connections you make there are very special. But to see that light in their eyes and to know, oh, they really like this, and they're getting something out of this. That's a great feeling.
That's the way. And is your fantasy course specifically, is that a second year?
It was, yeah. I mean, it hasn't run, unfortunately, because you don't want to get me started on another education rant like I had with Alan, but it hasn't run lately mainly because of curricular decisions made at the state level, honestly, but also at the administrative level at our college. These are decisions that I know that it wasn't deliberate or anything, but they resulted in a lot fewer literature courses,
which is unfortunate.
So yeah, my course was more or less a casualty, although I'll have a student who wants to do it as an independent study sometimes.
Oh, that's nice. And you just take on a mentorship role.
Yep.
Which can be nice as well. You get some of those in-depth discussions in that way. You get to really pour yourself into it.
Yeah, nothing worked
I read 11/22/63 by Stephen King recently.
Yeah, you just reviewed it, right? Yeah.
And I sent Alan a screenshot of one of the lines because the main character is a teacher. He's a high school teacher, but he goes back into the past. And there's a line in there about how certain things about the times have changed, but school administration remains the same. I sent it to Alan. He was like the most relatable quote in a book, but it's, I think, frustrating on many levels.
Yeah, Steven Erikson had a little snippet in I think it's in Dust of Dreams where he says academics are people who aren't good at anything else or something like that. It made me laugh. So it was a nice little dig. I probably mangled that a little bit there, but yeah, I noticed when you were talking, you said the lieutenant, right? You didn't say lieutenant like we would say down here.
Yes.
So you use the British pronunciation for those kinds of words, because that's what they say over there is lieutenant. I know you put all those U's in words like color too and all of that.
You do.
Yeah, you do.
And I think in Newfoundland, the pronunciations may extend even further because Newfoundland was still part of the British Empire until 1949. It's a relatively recent change.
It didn't, with the rest of Canada, become independent?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So Canada was 1867, and then various provinces came in at different times. So you had Upper and Lower Canada initially, and then you had different provinces come in, but Newfoundland was not until 1949. So it was post World War II, and it was very intense. So there are historical pictures, if you visit museums in Newfoundland, where they held a funeral in downtown St. John's with a casket that was covered in the British flag on the day that we joined Canada. So it was, I think, a difficult transition for some people.
Wow. Well, you're still part of the Commonwealth, right?
Yes. Yes.
Which doesn't mean a ton, I guess.
Doesn't mean a lot, but it's one of those things that some people really cling to. I don't understand necessarily why, but some people cling to that portion of the Canadian identity.
It means you don't need a visa, right, to visit the UK? Is that right?
We do. No, we still do.
You still do?
Yeah.
Oh, so what's the point of the Commonwealth then?
That's an excellent question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to. I've been to various parts of Canada. I've been to lots of Quebec, which is close to you, I guess, right? Because I'm from northern Vermont originally. So, but I also drove across the country when I was finished high school and went from Vermont all the way over to Washington State to do my bachelor's degree, and decided that driving across Canada sounded like a great idea. So all the way across the Trans-Canada Highway.
So you went up into BC and then just went all the way?
Yeah, well, it started in Vermont and then over toward the west. So I went up, I think in Quebec, and then just through all those provinces. And then all the way to BC, where I came down. And I think I just got a sliver of Montana, maybe.
Okay.
But eventually into Eastern Washington and then Western Washington, where I was. Through
that. So it was the opposite. I thought you went through to Washington, then up and back, but you went up through Canada, then down.
Yeah.
Into the US.
Yep.
Interesting. Yeah. So it's a great. I have not done a cross Canada trip. It is one of our family bucket list goals, I guess. Once I feel like the kids are at an age where they can be in the car for an extended period of time and not need constant pee breaks. A little more doable.
Guess what? When you reach a certain age, it's
gonna be Andrew and I who need the breaks. Yeah. Oh goodness.
Yeah, that's life. We, like we said before, we go through these fairly predictable cycles or portions of our lives. So yeah, the pee breaks will be back eventually.
It's interesting. You have to, interesting to some people, when you study for your licensing exam in psychiatry, they do pull in a lot of those old that kind of socio-developmental stages of human life. So there are the Erikson stages, funnily enough, that break up your life into those portions, those sections, and they all have values ascribed to them. So in adolescence, it has to do with identity, and then in later life, it will be about reflection, like reflection back, and how you resolve. So I guess the theory behind this developmental theory was you need to resolve each phase of your life in order to move on to the next one. And it's when you get arrested in a certain stage that you experience things like a midlife crisis, or you experience these things as a teenager, and that can influence. So when we had to study for our licensing exam, which is you have a written portion, but then you have a practical portion as well, you have to do what is called a psychological formulation. So you're given a person and a set of symptoms and circumstances about their life, and you have to try to relate it back to these developmental theories and why they may be experiencing certain things at certain points. So it's interesting because that idea of life having a variety of stages that you work your way through is a long-standing idea.
Thousands of years old. So you were referring to Erik Erikson, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, Erik Erikson. But this idea, you see it in Hinduism.
Definitely.
Of these life stages, like when you're young, that's your youth, and then you have the period of making a family, and these are your concerns at that point, and then at a certain point you reach a stage of withdrawal, and so these are insights that have been around for thousands of years. And
it's interesting, and I think comforting to see that despite the technological advances, despite the ways that the world has changed over the millennia, there's still that core of humanity that we maintain, that we can reflect back and see how our lives, despite the fact that they're probably on average 3 times as long than, as they were at that time, we still have those threads that work their way through.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was having a conversation with my wife the other day about this sort of myth of progress, and that, in certain important ways, we are better off than people were in previous centuries, no doubt about it. But there are certain insights, I think, about the human condition that have just been around for a long time. And you can see them in the oldest works of literature. In fact, I think there were people around thousands of years ago who were much more aware of who they are and what's around them than the typical person is today. So it's really kind of interesting when you peek back and you see that people understood our natures pretty well in some ways a long time ago. Yeah.
It's interesting stuff. You can fall into a rabbit hole of thinking and speculating. And I work a lot with adolescents. So there's a huge concern. I think a lot of parents, especially with the how rapidly the world has shifted and how much pressure there is to behave a certain way, and the constant monitoring about just happiness and peace with your place in the world, because it can be a difficult thing to come to terms with. And that when you said myth of progress, that is exactly where my mind went, is, in what ways have we improved the world? Many ways. But have we also, when you open up progress, you open up that space for difficulty as well. There has to be the balance there.
Yep, absolutely. And this is the cool thing to me about fantasy, because I feel like it's doing a lot of the same things that myths were doing centuries ago, and folk stories and stuff. And it has a lot of the same very important functions and asks a lot of the same questions about who we are and what we are and where we come from and where we're going. And I believe that they all have the capacity to give us this feeling that we belong in this world, that we are connected with the people and with the life around us, and that we have meaning. And that's a beautiful thing. It's always been the attraction, I think, for me. And Stephen Donaldson talked about that. Fantasy as the literature of reintegration, you feeling reintegrated with the world around you. I think that's a great insight into what it can do. Not that every work of fantasy needs to do that, because there's such a variety of things to explore, but that is one thing that certainly has attracted me to the genre.
Yeah, no, and that's a lovely way to put it. It's an excellent turn of phrase.
Yeah, the literature of reintegration. Yeah, he wrote these 2 essays on, and they're very short, really, on epic fantasy that I did a video on, and I was surprised how many people A, watched the video, and B, really responded to it. And I think that he was onto something there. That I think a lot of us, I think as a 12-year-old kid reading Lord of the Rings, part of the beauty of that experience, and I never could have put it into words as a 12-year-old, but part of the beauty of that experience was that feeling of empowerment, but also connection. Yeah. So I never looked at a forest the same way again after reading Lord of the Rings, because every forest in a way reminded me of Lothlorien, you know, and in a beautiful way. And so you look at life a little bit differently, I think. When you read a book, then you turn those last few pages, read those last few words, and you shut the cover and you're like, wow, you know, this is, you're in the midst of catharsis, but you're also in the midst of changing a little bit, maybe your perception of the world around you in the best possible way.
No, I agree. And fantasy, like you said, opens you up to that possibility. When you shed the need to feel like you're exploring something important. I think a lot of fantasy sheds that outward pretension, and it allows you to get at those emotional undercurrents. That's one of the things that I like about reading fantasy as well. And not to say that fantasy can't be high literature. Like you said, there's, such a variety of fantasy, but I think at its core, it allows people to do that. It allows you to think that way and open your mind in that way, in a way that other subgenres or genres of literature, it's a little more difficult.
Yeah, well said. Beautifully said. Well, on that note, maybe that's a good thing to wrap up with, these insights, or at least what we've experienced, I think, as lovers of this genre. And it's been so much fun getting to know you, not just today, but on BookTube, and having the opportunity to talk with people like you is what really makes me so happy to be part of this community. So I really want to just personally thank you, Sarah, for being on BookTube, for having a channel with awesome content, and just for being a wonderful person.
Thank you. And I think everybody knows that you are something to be appreciated in the BookTube community. So I think we are all very grateful to have you here as well.
Well, thank you very much. That means a lot to me. And thank you to everybody who's watched, and appreciate it. And if you haven't already checked out, I should have said this in the beginning, sorry. But if you haven't checked out Sarah's channel, please, by all means, do. I will have a link to it in the description. One of the smartest and most wonderful persons you can meet on BookTube. So absolutely check it out. And thanks for watching, everyone.